This is the moment in Red Dead Redemption when we ride into Mexico for the first time. At this point, we're about a third of the way through the game. We've left the United States to hunt down our ex-gang member, who's narrowly escaped our grasp. It is one of the best examples of how music can elevate a sequence in the history of gaming. The somber guitars reflect our feelings of isolation and hopelessness as we push on to be reunited with our family at any cost. The closer we get to finding our redemption, the further and further away it seems. Many people, including myself, consider this one of the best gaming moments of all time, with Red Dead Redemption hailed as one of the best games of the 7th console generation. The reception was monumentally positive, as it was rare for a mainstream game in this genre to function the way that Red Dead did. It had a deeply personal narrative that was grand in scope, and forced us to question morality by holding up a mirror to our own society. Our main character wasn't a generic hero or villain. He was a complex human being who did just as much evil as he did good. The storytelling was never generic, and Rockstar even flipped gaming conventions on their head at the end of the game. Rather than let us complete the final mission in a glorious crescendo, we ultimately lose, and it's almost game over. Replaying Red Dead Redemption today is honestly astounding, as it still holds up extremely well even 13 years later. It's clear that Rockstar were pushing the boundaries of what was possible at the time to create this stunning landscape packed with detail throughout. Each area of the map feels real and lived in, with realistic day-night cycles for NPCs that blur the lines between game and simulation. As with their seminal work on the early 3D GTA games, Rockstar has taken ideas from other games at the time, expanded on them, and brought everything together in one monumental package. Quite frankly, Red Dead Redemption, along with a handful of other games, pushed the medium forwards. It helped evolve video games and prove to critics that our favourite hobby can be something more. Games can be art, they can be grown up, and they can move us in the same way that any film ever has. So throughout this review, let's look at everything great about this exceptional game, and a few areas I think it could be improved. Let's find out why Red Dead Redemption was a landmark moment in gaming history. The narrative in Red Dead Redemption is surprisingly similar to GTA 4, as both games are set in a world that Rockstar believes is broken. In GTA 4, the setting of 2008's Liberty City shined a cynical light on life in the modern Western world. We see characters struggling to make sense of their lives, often heartbroken, addicted to drugs, or abandoned by the people around them. The American dream we were all promised didn't come true for us all. In Red Dead Redemption, Rockstar continues this trend by examining life in America at the turn of the 20th century. We follow John Marston on his quest for redemption as the days of the outlaw are slowly dying out. This land is being civilized as a new government starts to form. At the highest level, this is a story about a man trying to be reunited with his family. But as Rockstar continues to show their narrative chops, this is actually a story about morality as we question what is right and wrong in a rapidly changing world. Although this story isn't set in the modern day, Rockstar makes it relevant to our own society. We see government agents manipulate John to their will, often framing events to suit their own narratives, or blackmailing their competitors to gain more power in the country. We visit Mexico and become entangled in a revolution that highlights both sides in a war are fundamentally flawed. An army general abuses his captures and sends people to death without a trial, but then the leader of the revolution cares less about the cause and more about fame and women. And when we work with the Marshal of Armadillo, we see him overwhelmed by the evil around him. He lets outlaws run free nearby, as long as they don't cross into his territory and terrorize his citizens. He can only protect the people around him, and everyone else is unfortunately on their own. In fact, if we were to summarize the message of both games in a very basic way, it would be something like this. The message in GTA 4 is life is tough, whereas in Red Dead Redemption, it's life is corrupt. We're shown that people are neither good nor evil, and everyone is capable of doing bad things when they're forced to.
It's so confusing, Father. Sometimes I find it impossible to make the distinction between a loving act and a hateful one. I mean, they often seem to be the same thing.
This is best shown through our main character, John. John is a perfect example of how to write complex characters in any piece of entertainment. He's a character with a strict moral code who helps people throughout the game, while at the same time killing others if he thinks it's for the right reasons. We see his sinister side rise to the surface as he threatens characters when they're not giving him what he wants, or when he kills people for revenge. In many ways, we empathise with John, which forces us to question what is right and wrong in this world. Sure, he kills people like a gun for hire without much resistance, but at the same time, he's doing this for his family. In his past, he rode in a gang that broke the law, but then he acted like a Robin Hood type figure, often stealing from the rich and giving it to the people who needed it more. From John's point of view, life isn't fair. He thinks that good people die for no reason, and that's just the way it is.
What is fair?
Well, some trees flourish, others die. Some cattle grow strong, others are taken by wolves. Some men are born rich enough and dumb enough to enjoy their lives. Ain't nothing fair, you know that.
The way these themes are handled is up there with the best we have in gaming. Because rather than dumping exposition on us at every chance, Rockstar holds information back and gradually reveals it in subtle ways. During the introduction to the game, for example, we see John entering Blackwater, escorted by two people we later learn are government agents. We walk through town with a perfectly Western-inspired score before boarding a train heading to an unknown place. None of the characters speak to each other, and we have no idea where we are or what we're doing. We simply learn snippets of information by eavesdropping on other passengers on the train. We eventually get to Fort Mercer and meet Bill Williamson, and again it's not clear why we're here. Our motives are never explained, and we're not sure what our quest is. Rather than John and Bill speaking like characters reading from a script, they speak like real-life acquaintances who have a complicated past. John never says lines like, "Come on Bill, you're my favourite member of the gang we used to run with," and Bill never replies with, "What, even more than our leader Dutch?" No, because this is lazy writing. We do learn that these two characters know each other from some time ago, and they both know someone called Dutch, but that's it. Rockstar never uses titles like this to set the scene, or start the game with an animated cinematic to explain the current state of the world. We learn what year it is by the date on our map, and we find out what's happening in the world by reading the local paper. It's a really clever way of delivering a narrative that always respects our intelligence. We eventually learn why we're here, to hunt down the last remaining outlaws of our ex-gang, who you'll be pretty familiar with if you played Red Dead Redemption 2. And in return, if we successfully track everyone down, the government will release our family and let us leave this life of violence behind. The narrative is at its best when we're focused on this main plot point and we complete objectives related to it, like when we steal a Gatling gun and sneak into Fort Mercer to attack Bill. There are times, though, when we take offshoots from the main plot and our quest takes a back seat. For example, when we head to Mexico to chase Bill, in a section which admittedly is very impressive, the narrative dips in quality. We end up working for the Mexican army and their rebel opposition, as both parties have information on Javier and Bill. I know that we are progressing the plot in some way, as helping them helps us, but we never see this progress in a meaningful way. We simply work for them until they have the information we need. Obviously, Rockstar are using this section to ask bold questions about war and whether good can come from violence. And to be clear, I really enjoy these moments. There are a ton of great moments throughout this section, and exploring Mexico was incredible. It's just a shame this section wasn't weaved into the main plot more effectively. We don't see Bill or Javier make an appearance for quite some time, and it feels like we're chasing shadows. For example, the narrative is at its best when we go after Dutch. Dutch makes several appearances on screen and acts more like a traditional villain. We go face to face with him and see him acting in evil ways when he happily kills a hostage without a second thought. These moments also work so well because Rockstar have spent time developing the past relationship between John and Dutch. We know that Dutch brought John up in his old gang after John's mother died in childbirth and he was sadly orphaned. We know that Dutch is like a father figure to John, who taught him how to read, shoot and survive. And we know that Dutch is a man that started with good intentions, but somewhere lost his way. When John is asked why Dutch turned out the way he did, he says Dutch probably realised that things never change. The final confrontation with Dutch has so much weight for this reason, like everything has cruelly come full circle for John. Of course, Dutch has lost his way, but will killing him actually change anything?
When I'm gone, they'll just find another monster. They have to. Because they have to justify their wages.
What's genius about this is that it soon becomes clear that none of this is justified, as John doesn't find his redemption. What follows is another contender for the best gaming moments of all time, when Rockstar flips gaming conventions on their head. After we reunite with our family and start a new life at our ranch Beecher's Hope, the government doesn't hold up their end of the bargain. They storm the ranch and we find ourselves trapped in our barn with the US Army waiting outside. Now, back in 2010, there were definitely games where we died at the end. We died at the end of Mafia in 2002, as well as God of War 3 and Halo Reach in the same year as Red Dead Redemption. But what makes this stand out compared to other games is the way that Rockstar has executed it. Throughout the game, we're taught that Deadeye will pretty much save us in most situations. Deadeye is helpful in the early game to line up our shots in slow motion, only to basically become a superpower by the end when we can tag targets with an X. Every time we're outnumbered or about to die, we activate Deadeye, tag the group of enemies, and watch John take everyone down in less than a second. So, we're taught that Deadeye saves our life. What happened next was completely unexpected for this very reason, because when we leave the barn, we're faced with a group of enemies. Deadeye activates, and we're tricked into thinking we can save John's life. Ultimately though, we can't, and no matter how many times we replay this section, we're always gunned down with no way to survive. Rather than winning at the end of the game, we always lose. We then fast forward to 4 years later and finish the game playing as John's son Jack. We track down the man who killed our father, and in some way, we finally get our redemption. Along with the ride into Mexico, this is one of the most memorable moments I've ever had in gaming. I've never forgotten either of these moments since playing Red Dead in 2010. Sure, there are similarities to Halo Reach, as we also die in a similar way during the final level, but we always knew Reach fell from Halo lore. In Red Dead Redemption, we didn't know that this was going to happen, and that was even before Rockstar tricked us. There's a bit of foreshadowing here and there, but it came completely out of the blue, flipped a mechanic on its head, and resonated perfectly. So many of these big moments work because Rockstar never rushes the narrative. The game is extremely slow paced at times, and it can be a lot of work. We spend hours riding across the desert on horseback talking to another character, and sometimes literally as a passenger where we sit there and listen. I vividly remember trying to convince my mates to play this game back in 2010, but every time I showed them the gameplay, they said it looked boring and didn't see how riding along narrow paths on horseback was fun. Take that with a grain of salt, as we were 17 at the time, but I do understand where they were coming from. But for me, these moments were incredible, whether it was going hunting with Jack and being frustrated at John as he struggles to be a father to him, or whether it was discussing poverty and whether it's our responsibility to help people in need, or the moment when John is reunited with Abby and we see Bonnie watch them drive away. Bonnie looks at them as they ride into the distance and doesn't say a word. Abby thinks she has feelings for John, but really, we'll never know. There are a few moments when the writing is too on the nose, or when characters overact for comedic effect.
Damn you, the gods of bad weather!
But honestly, these moments don't take away from what is an exceptional work of art. Rockstar uses this narrative to comment on our own society and ensures the focus is on the human connection at every step of the way. We're asked to empathise with these characters and try to make sense of their actions in this odd world. Along with the narrative, the open world is another area where Rockstar were pushing the boundaries of games at the time. The open world is designed to be as realistic as possible, where it feels like a real place rather than a video game space. Paths are worn and trodden, parlour tables are scuffed where people have placed their drinks, and washing blows realistically on the line. Yeah, washing on a line looked like this in a game that came out in 2010, and looked like this in the definitive edition of San Andreas that came out in 2021.
Hello?
The map is split into 3 different areas to create an open world that is big enough to explore, but never feels overwhelming. We have 2 main regions in the United States, and 1 in Mexico. This isn't a modern Assassin's Creed map that takes 70 hours to clear. And this isn't Elden Ring that takes over 130 hours to find every secret on the map. This is a Rockstar-style open world that respects our time and takes around 30 hours to beat. This streamlined design is something that modern games can learn from, because rather than forcing Rockstar to copy and paste assets to fill each corner of a mammoth map, they can handcraft the main areas and make them distinctly different from the next. Each main area is unique and full of detail throughout, where I never felt the immersion break. Whether it was the wooden buildings, saloons and dusty streets in the Wild West town of Armadillo, or the graffitied walls and white adobe houses in Escalera, to the swampy settlement of Thieves' Landing, or the highly civilized town of Blackwater, where the government has started to rule. Here we see paved streets, a town square with grass and a bandstand, and even a luxury hotel for people to stay in. The attention to detail throughout these areas is astonishing, even by today's standards. There are shops impressively packed with individual handcrafted assets, saloons with pianos and parlour games where people stumble out drunk, and the tiniest of details that most people wouldn't even think of. Go to a saloon in the morning and it's empty because no one has turned up to open its doors. If we go to the cinema in Armadillo, it's a ramshackle building with wooden benches and a small screen, compared to the luxury cinema with a grand lobby and plush seats in Blackwater. And I mean, Rockstar even included water towers, wells and generators to show how people survive out here. They avoid the trap that games around this time fell into by making sure each settlement is believable as a real place. The most impressive feature, though, is how Rockstar programmed the NPCs to act like real people. We see this in most open world games, as developers add realistic NPCs to help sell the illusion their world is real. Things like people sitting in restaurants eating food, or construction workers working in the road. The difference in Red Dead Redemption, though, is that these animations aren't looped. A lot of games loop these animations endlessly, which means the immersion breaks if we stop and watch for a minute. This simply doesn't happen here, as individual NPCs have different animations, as well as day and night cycles. They'll get up in the morning to open their shop, work a full day, and then they might go to the saloon before heading to bed in the evening. If we need something from a specific NPC, like playing horseshoes for example, we literally have to wait for them to wake up before we can play. It's crazy how well this works, as it makes the world feel like a real place. It feels like the world is working around us, rather than for us. We are not the main character in this space, we're just another person going about our day. Outside of the main settlements, the differences aren't as distinct. As we spend a lot of time riding across the desert, it's easy to switch off as each sandy plain rolls into the next. Sure, Rockstar does use colour and unique flora and fauna to make each area different, but these differences don't do enough to make the map interesting over the entirety of Red Dead's playtime. It's hard to be excited by a slight colour change when you've been through an area 20 times. This was clearly a design choice that Rockstar had to contend with, as they wanted to create a feeling of isolation as we're alone in the wilderness with little around us, similar to something like Breath of the Wild. The sparse map in both games is supposed to make it more exciting when we do find something, as everything is much rarer. In this way, this design works very well, as discovering something new does create a memorable moment, like when we cross paths with NPCs who are also making their way through the world. We'll see a group of outlaws rampaging through a town, or people camping as they rest for the night, who might invite us over if they're friendly, or threaten us if they're hostile.
I'm in a bad place here.
This led to one of the best encounters I had in the entire game. One time I came across a man drowning his sorrows after his friend had recently died. I turned up, and this happened. In other areas, Rockstar uses a random piece of content known as friends to help make exploration engaging in the open world. We'll cross paths with someone as we explore who will either want to help us or they might attack us. We might have to chase after someone who's just robbed a store, retrieve the money and give it back to the owner. Or someone will ask us for a lift into town, only to try and steal our horse when we get close to them. In the early to mid-game, these work very well, as they break up those long silent horse rides. The problem comes then with how often these encounters repeat. Sure, there is an impressive amount of variety here, especially for 2010, but there's still not enough to completely pad out the world. I saw the same friend encounter over 5 times in Armadillo, as a lady was attacked outside the saloon over and over again, with the same animations each time. Once we realise that these encounters repeat, we start to notice it everywhere in the open world. The engaging exploration we had up until this point falls off, as we realise there's nothing new waiting for us as we explore. I also should say that none of these ideas are new. GTA 4 had friends as well as an extremely detailed world, and other games like 1990's Shenmue and Oblivion in 2006 also had NPCs with realistic day-night cycles. But Red Dead Redemption used these ideas and took them to the next level. They included more realistic representations of NPCs to immerse us in this world in a way that was extremely rare at the time. It's similar to how Red Dead Redemption 2 took ideas from around the time that it was released and took them to even greater heights, with more detail, more realism, and more unique encounters than we'd ever seen. So, So far, we have an exceptional narrative, an open world that was ahead of its time, and as you can already tell from this footage, we have visuals that look great even today. The landscapes in this game are stunning, and the detail on characters' faces is seriously impressive. Most games simply didn't have this level of fidelity back in 2010. The facial animations in Mass Effect 2 from the same year look okay, but they weren't as realistic as Red Dead Redemption. Other games from the same year were also way behind. Of course, there were some limitations due to the technology at the time. There's quite a lot of pop-in when we're exploring in the open world, and the lighting is obviously worse than modern games. A lot of light sources come out of nowhere, and characters' faces are sometimes illuminated in odd ways. They just seem to be lit up with no light source actually around them. Although the game looks great on the whole, with stunning environments throughout, a remaster or a remake would be great to iron out these minor creases. There are rumours that one will be announced very soon, and that may even happen by the time this video is out. I really hope it's true, because playing through this again with modern visuals would be an incredible experience. Mission-wise, this is also some of Rockstar's greatest work. It's honestly mind-blowing what's on offer here, with an outstanding amount of variety between each mission. We'll go from robbing a train in Mexico, to assaulting a group of outlaws held up in a mansion, to a horror-inspired mission on a haunted shipwreck, to timed missions where we make a dash to escape Mexico, to a sniper section or a Gatling gun section, and so much more. I was always excited to play the next mission, simply because I had no idea what would be in store. New weapons are introduced to keep things fresh like in most games, but then there'd be something new on top of this too. There'd be a new mechanic that was used once throughout the game, or Rockstar would program a group of NPCs to fight by our side. What would be a simple combat section in another game turns into a skirmish as we push up the battlefield as a unit. These encounters never become stale, as each battle sprawls across the open world. We might have a shootout from the rooftops before charging into a bank, only to finish the fight miles away in the woods. And along the way we see the groundbreaking physics create organic moments for every shootout. We can shoot someone's legs and they'll fall to the floor, and either continue to fight or lay there calling for help until they bleed out. If we shoot someone's hat, it pings off their head and flies to the ground, and if we shoot an enemy's hand, they'll drop their weapon. Sometimes they'll swap to another weapon, but if they've left their second gun at home, they'll stand there and surrender. And I know that other games have mechanics like this. We can disarm people in 2008's Crackdown, as well as the more recent Cyberpunk 2077. But there's just something special about these physics compared to other games. It's the randomness, never knowing what could happen in each encounter, and the incredible moments when we see something unique.
We're burning, boom!
It's clear that Rockstar have used their learnings from GTA's mission design here, as we see them take simple missions and elevate them to something special. There are a ton of these missions throughout the game, and I'd recommend playing or replaying Red Dead to experience them all. But let's discuss one of the early missions, and you'll see what I mean. This mission has an extremely simple setup. After all, we're helping the Marshal of Armadillo rescue a family from a group of bandits. But what's special about this mission is how Rockstar has designed it. As soon as the cutscene starts, they start to build tension. We learn that the bandits have murdered locals and have abused people in horrific ways. We see that the Marshal sheriffs are visibly shaken, and one even takes a shot of whiskey to settle his nerves before we head out into the dark of night. As this mission progresses, Rockstar ramp up the suspense. We find the bandits' latest victims around a campfire and see their horrific crimes firsthand. No one else is around us, and we don't know where the bandits are. When we get to the family's farm, it's eerily silent, and we're asked to search the premises. We search around and don't find anything. That is, until we go to the barn and see it has been barred from the outside. I probably can't show you what's inside as it's too graphic, but if you played Red Dead, you'll know it's not good. A lone survivor tells us the bandits are in the farmhouse and they're holding people hostage, so we head inside and breach each room one by one with a clever use of Deadeye to save the final hostage. To me, this is a perfect mission, and it shows why Rockstar are the best in this genre. They've taken what is an extremely simple idea and added little strokes of genius to make it memorable. The suspense, the way we gradually track down the bandits and witness their crimes, and the final combat section with unique mechanics like breaching each room. I guess compared to modern games, we don't have different ways to tackle a mission like we do today. The missions usually make us follow the route that Rockstar has planned. We'll attack a prison in Mexico, but then Rockstar makes us climb over a gap in the wall, rather than giving us different ways to enter. Or we'll scale a mountain to spy on Dutch's hideout, but then Rockstar shows us where to climb to get us started. I even tried leaving the area to find another way up here, but as soon as I left the mission area, I failed the mission. This is also an issue I had with GTA 4, as we also have to tackle most encounters by going in all guns blazing. But to be fair to Red Dead, we do have more options than GTA 4 here. We do have some options for stealth with the lasso and the throwing knives, but then the stealth mechanics aren't developed well enough to make this viable. There's no light and shadow mechanic like we had in San Andreas, and we can't hide in the bushes like in modern games. Arguably, Red Dead Redemption isn't trying to be a game with different ways to play. This isn't an immersive sim like Prey, where there's 5 different ways to solve a puzzle. And this isn't a mechanically driven open world game like Tears of the Kingdom. But interestingly, I think these complaints are valid, as Rockstar has included RPG mechanics in the game to give us choice in other areas. We have a morality meter that changes based on our actions, like the karma system in Fallout, and an overall fame meter that increases as we complete activities, similar to something like Wasteland 3. Both of these systems are executed to a high standard, as Rockstar cleverly weaves them into the game. If we play Red Dead like we're playing GTA and start gunning down civilians, then we lose honour. But if we help people out, say in a friend encounter, our honour increases as we're doing good. As our meter levels up, we also unlock perks like discounts in shops or earning more money from jobs. By far the best example of these systems though is the fame meter. The fame meter increases as we complete missions, and we see the legend of our deeds spread across the West. This means by the end of the game, when our fame meter is full, people start to recognise us. They'll make a comment as we pass by, like we're an early 20th century celebrity.
You're John Marston. I don't believe it. I've heard so much about you.
This is great, as in true RPG style, we're seeing the world change around us. In order to be a good RPG though, we also have to make tough decisions along the way that change the narrative in interesting ways. For example, we might choose to wipe out a faction from the map, or blow up an entire settlement because our character is evil. This does happen to a certain degree, but Rockstar never goes far enough. They do give us choices throughout the game, but our decision doesn't have wider repercussions in the world or the story. A good example of this is when we confront DeSanta, a captain of the Mexican army who betrayed us earlier in the game. Here we're given the choice to kill DeSanta or walk away, but if we choose to do the morally good thing and walk away, the revolutionaries shoot DeSanta anyway, making the choice pointless.
I'll pay you. Think about your family.
He's all yours, fellers. I got what I need.
¡Esto es para México!
Other times we do decide the fates of main characters like Javier, but again, this is pointless too. If we kill Javier, we are made to feel bad by Agent Ross and Fordham, who scold us for not bringing him in alive. But that's really it.
I've always loved you. Even now.
It's frustrating because Rockstar used better RPG choices in GTA 4 that had real consequences in the world. Like at the end of the game, when we choose to make a deal with Dimitri or take our revenge and kill him. If we decide to let Dimitri live, he betrays us and sends one of his men to our cousin Roman's wedding. The assassin tries to take down Nico, but ultimately Roman dies in the crossfire. Then after the credits roll, we get a call from Roman's widow who tells us she was pregnant and their unborn child will now grow up without a father. All because of the choice we made. I mean, that is brutal. And I know that GTA 4 isn't perfect with its RPG mechanics either, as there's usually a right or wrong choice. But at least when we do make the wrong choice, we're made to feel guilty, and we just don't have that here. I will say that the Stranger side missions use these RPG systems far more effectively. The Stranger missions provide small vignettes into people's lives who are trying to make something of themselves in the dying West. At times, these are poignant, like discovering an elderly lady has lost her mind after her husband died many years ago. To comical, like when a writer from Manhattan tries to capture life in the West for his monthly magazine article. He arrives only to realise he's completely unprepared for the harsh realities of life out here, and we have to rescue him from different points on the map. Throughout these missions, we're often given different options at crucial points, whether we're paying someone for information or deciding whether to kill someone or let them live. It's pretty basic for any RPG to have these choices, but it's always better to have them than not, even if they are simple. One of the best examples of these choices is in one of the stranger missions early in the game, where we have to get the deed for an elderly man's property. So we're given the option to buy the deed, or straight up kill the man and take it. I chose to kill him, and when I returned the deed to the mission giver, he was furious.
Oh, there's blood on this deed, Marston. I didn't tell you to kill the poor old man.
We also learn that the man we've just killed has a son living in Blackwater, and we realise we've killed a normal human being, a man with a family, just like us. These moments show that Rockstar can add great choices into the game, but they always use them in minor moments. Having more meaningful choices in the main narrative could have made the big moments more impactful, and forced us to question morality in a much deeper way. This is a core theme of the game, and it's a shame it wasn't used in the big moments more effectively. As we come to the end of this review and look back at Red Dead Redemption, it's mind-blowing how well it holds up today. The exceptional narratives we have today were simply not as common at the time. We had great stories in games over the years, but it was rare for a game to tackle big issues like Red Dead did. It's obviously impossible to say that Red Dead was the game that changed that, but we can safely say it was one of the games that did. Along with the stunning presentation, the open world has features that most games can't match. Rockstar's push to create a fully immersive world was successful, and what we have here is one of the best open worlds in gaming. The realism and attention to detail would help form the benchmark of open worlds at the time, with its influence seen in other games many years later. You know, I was always impressed with the open world in Red Dead Redemption 2, but it turns out the groundwork was already there back in 2010. Red Dead Redemption is, and always will be, one of the greatest games ever made, and I hope this franchise continues long into the future.